Jared Polin, FronosPhoto.com, and this is a review of the brand new Canon 70-200 2.8Z edition. Now, this is also going to be a comparison video, but when we get further into the video, I will talk to you more about the comparisons. But what did I photograph with this lens? Well, I took it over to the park to photograph a kid running around. I took it on a hike with a couple of dogs to get some cool dog content. I took it to a squash practice with two of the best squash players in the United States. And I also took it to a basketball game where I put it side by side against the older RF version. Now, before we get into the side-by-side comparisons and going over the images here, let's talk about this Z lens. This is a hybrid lens from Canon. Now, what do they mean by hybrid? They mean that it's great for stills and it's also designed to work really well with video. It is just like the 24-105 2.8 hybrid that they came out with last year. In fact, they share the same exact housing, the same shell, the same design. Of course, the innards are different when it comes to the elements because this is a 70-200 and this is a 24-105. But the reason that Canon went with the same design of the outside is that you can put this on a gimbal and then you can swap it out to the 70-200, and with very minor changes, because the difference in weight, you are going to be able to get shooting much quicker. That is what they mean by hybrid, that it's going to be great for stills as well as for video. But it also brings up the question of, if it isn't called a hybrid lens, does that mean it's not good for both? I don't think so. I think they might run into some trouble calling certain things hybrid, and there might be some confusion in the marketplace, but I'm not confused at all. Let's talk about the outside of the lens. This right here is a beautiful, nice and balanced feeling 70-200 2.8. And yes, it is an internal zooming lens, unlike the original RF version that came out 6+ years ago. That was the 70-200 Chode edition. This lens is absolutely gorgeous. By the way, it comes in white and it also comes in black. So you get the white lens hood right here with the white one and the black lens hood with the black one. On the lens hood, you have your door. That's great if you have a filter on here and you want to go ahead and rotate it. That's why there is a door right here. You have an 82mm filter thread on the front of this. They've always been 77, but now it's slightly larger at 82. You've got a couple of custom buttons here on the outside, which you did not have on the original RF version. That didn't have any of the custom buttons. This is where your foot goes. I took it off because I personally don't shoot with it. If you are going to shoot this on a tripod or a monopod, of course, you're going to want to leave the foot on. I personally take it off and move it out of the way. You have an aperture ring right here, which I personally am going to keep on lock all of the time, but if you are a hybrid shooter and you want to control this, you can go ahead and do that, or with the R5 Mark II or the R1, you'll be able to control that inside of the camera while you're shooting video. In terms of switches, you have 4 switches on the side here. We've got the stabilization modes 1, 2, and 3, stabilization on and off, AF and manual switch, as well as your focus limiter switch on the side of the lens. This is a gorgeous lens. You also have your contacts here because this is a hybrid lens and it can work with the power zoom adapter, which is $1,000, and that screws in to these screws here on the side and talks with the lens here, which allows you to do power zooming just like you could do with the 24-105 2.8. This is a beautiful feeling lens in the hands. Let me break out the original 70-200 2.8 RF. I call that the Chode edition. When this came out, there were some questionable choices that were made. One, the fact that they made it much smaller was nice. It's nice to make it smaller, but there's 2 issues with that. One is when you zoom it, it's an external zooming lens, which means it will zoom as you zoom. It's externally zooming, which isn't great if you're someone who shoots against glass at a hockey game and you know where you need to be, but you're close to glass and you try to zoom, it's gonna push you backwards. That's not great. And the other issue is the zoom throw, which is how you go from 70 to 200. I have to clamp down with my finger to clamp and rotate this. You can't just, I'm trying to slide, look, I am trying to slide my thumb and it doesn't move. I need 2 fingers on this to make it work. That's a problem for professionals. Why? Because with this, I can literally sit here with my thumb, I'll rotate this way, and do that. No other contact. I'm just moving my thumb. That is a short zoom throw, and it is much easier to go from 70 to 200, where it's not as easy to do that with this. And I did find that it caused me to get my angles wrong or miss shots that I wouldn't have missed if I had the proper zoom ring going from 70 to 200. Those are some of the differences, but let's look at the actual specs. The new one comes in at 7.83 inches versus 5.75 inches for the Chode edition. And just for fun, I also have the version 3 EF with an adapter on it. That's 10 inches. I mean, that looks pretty big for 10 inches, but that's massive when you put the adapter on there. Look at the difference here. Look how big and much longer that lens is. Also, the zoom throw on this was much better than the RF version, which is why a lot of people questioned it and are like, what was wrong with the old design? Why are you doing this? So you can see the differences in size right here. Let me cut in here real quick because I want to show you how you can take the awesome files that come out of your Canon and make them even better with our Lightroom presets, starting here with FroPack 4 with Blue's Clues, followed by Brooklyn, C41, Coppertone, High C, Kaleidoscope, Mel Brooks, Saltwater Taffy, and Thick. These things look incredible. But check this out, exclusive and all new to FroPack 4, we have 4 custom adaptive Lightroom presets called X1, X2, X3, and X4. We've got one that does face enhance, we have full body enhance, we have eyes only enhance, and we have blur background. But there is more. From FroPack 1, my all-time favorite preset is Skittles. Check this out. With one click, we've got Skittles, and boom. So look, if you want to speed up your RAW workflow or give yourself a great starting point with your R5 Mark II, we've created 14 all-new custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at fronosphoto.com/FroPack4. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters, and if you decide to pick them up right now, they are currently on sale. Or if you want to get the Grand Slam bundle that includes FroPack 1, 2, 3, and 4, and of course Skittles, you can save even more. Now, let's get back to the video. Now, in terms of weight, the Z version comes in at 2.5 pounds or 1,115 grams, which is 25% lighter than the version 3. Now, I'm not a big fan of using something that's 2 generations later and comparing it like Apple does to their first generation. It's like, it's 10 times faster. I'm like, yeah, that's great. But in comparison to the RF version, this is only 1/10 of a pound lighter. So the difference in weight is not that much, though when you pick up the RF version, it feels heavier than the new one, because the new one is just balanced so much better across the range that it just feels better in the hands. Now, there is something else that I want to show you right here. When we zoom out the RF version and put it next to the new one, you can see that it actually extends just a little further than the new one. So right there, it's a little more compact than this. Now, for travel purposes, of course, the more compact lens is better. When you put it in your camera bag and it's smaller, it's not sticking out or falling out, whereas this thing is just gonna topple out of your bag because it's just so freaking long. I know that's what she said. But this is also many generations ago at this point, and it's still a great lens. And we'll talk about that at the very end here. But let's talk about a couple of more things with this lens. The new lens has 5.5 stops of built-in image stabilization, but when you pair it with a body that has IBIS, you will get up to 7 stops. Now let's talk about my favorite thing, which is not actually my favorite thing, how many aperture blades you have. You have 9 in the original, and you have 11 in the new one, which makes 11 better than 9. Will you see much of a difference? If you pixel peep, you'll probably see some sort of a difference if you're actually looking for it, but in the real world, you probably won't. A couple of more things before we get into the comparison and the images here on the iPad is that you have dual USM motors inside of this lens. It is super blazingly fast, and so is the RF version. The RF version is blazingly fast on all of the RF bodies, and it's been fantastic for the 6+ years that we've used it. But the new one is super silent, super fast, and very, very accurate, especially on the R1, the R5 Mark II, the R3. Honestly, across the board, the autofocus is fantastic. And one of the biggest complaints that people had about the RF version 6.5 years ago is that you couldn't use adapters, a 1.4 or a 2X. Well, Canon listened to you. You can put an adapter onto the 70-200Z. You could put a 1.4 on there, and you could also then put on a 2X. Now, what they're not doing, as of now, is releasing teleconverters that are either black or white. They have them in white, but I don't think you'll be able to use them in black. I personally am not a fan of teleconverters, even putting it onto a lens like this, but I could see that news shooters or people that need to run and gun and get the shot might need just a little bit of extra reach and are going to be perfectly happy putting a 1.4 or 2X on there where they didn't have the option before, so it is always nice to have that option. Now, enough talking about these lenses. Let's jump into some of the pictures, starting out in the park, photographing the little kid. Now, I went out there with just me and the camera. I didn't record the EVF for this because I just wanted to get a feel for the lens. And the first thing I noticed when I got out there was how great it was to zoom from 70-200. It was a fast throw, and that's something that we didn't have with the RF version. Two images right here. I just love how sharp he is. He's just standing there, but the colors go boom. The sharpness is incredible, edge to edge. I'm really happy with the results that I got here, and I just feel that I'm able to get better results when I'm not fighting with the zoom of the RF because it's external and causing me to rack my wrist all the way around to try and get from 70-200 and end up missing the shot or getting my lines wrong. We do not have that problem anymore. The next photo where he's wearing his Winnie the Pooh shirt, I just loved the way that this looked, especially with our preset on here. He looks incredible. It's just one of those moments that I had pre-capture on with the R1, and I was able to get something that happened so fast when he turned to me. Awesome, beautiful shot. The next thing that I photographed, I went out to the park, took a hike with a couple of dogs, got some really cool photos of the dogs running towards me, as well as sitting on a rock, and I just love the tones here. I used copper tone with extra bronzer for this from our FroPack 4, and the colors just look exactly how I wanted them to look. And the sharpness is beautiful, and everything about the image I absolutely love at 2.8. And again, just having the ability to zoom and not have to worry about twisting your wrist all the way around to zoom makes you get shots that you otherwise would have missed if you were using the RF version. But now let's jump out to the squash courts, because here is where I photographed with the electronic viewfinder, so you can watch everything that's happening from the focus to the zoom going back and forth. And I used all three of the lenses out here at the squash court. I used the new version, the Z, I used the RF, and then I used the adapted version of the version 3 EF. Let me jump in here real quick and say, would you like me to send you a free guide to capturing motion in low light situations? If you said yes, just look for this orange box over on the website, put your name, email address in it, hit send it, and I will send you that guide for free. Now, I've never photographed squash before, but it's kind of cool because you can shoot behind the glass down low. It was pretty clean, but keep in mind, I was shooting through glass. The light wasn't tremendous, so I was shooting at a higher ISO, which makes sharpness look a little different. But I also did go out and photograph basketball, which we'll get into the next section, which is obviously a clear shot with slightly better lighting. Now, I used all three of these lenses, and when I was editing the images, I didn't know which lens was which means that they all did a very good job. Now, what I did notice is when I was trying to go to the electronic viewfinder to record which lens I was using, I have a note card, and it has either a 2 or a 1 or a 3 on it, and that would specify which lens I was using so we could show you guys which it was. And I noticed that the close focusing was much better with the new Z lens than the original EF. I had to stand up with the EF at 70 millimeters just to get the paper in focus. And it was a little better than with the RF as well. So here is a squash image. Not the easiest sport to shoot, but if you rely on that autofocus, it just tracks the eye perfectly well. This one was done with the original RF 70-200 2.8, and it worked really well. It looks really good. The next image right here, I have to look at the metadata to tell you that this is the version 3, the adapted EF. But even when you zoom in, it's extremely sharp. It's in focus. It looks great, and this is the version 3 IS. This is an adapted lens. The moral of the story here is that all 3 of these lenses are great. So you don't really need to beat yourself up if you have an RF version or if you just bought the RF version. This is fantastic. The EF is fantastic. The Z is incredible. They're all extremely good. Let's move on to the next one. This one is done with the Z. It's fine. Everything about it is great in the real world. Like if we sat here and just tested these things all day, you would probably see more differences than when you are shooting in the real world. A couple of more squash images here. I actually went out and sat on the squash court, and being that these guys are professionals, they said that they wouldn't hit me, and they didn't hit me with the ball because that would have hurt, because they hit it at 150 miles an hour, up to 170 miles an hour. Which I didn't want to take a ball to the face, so I kept the camera really close to my face just in case, and I closed my legs so I didn't get hit with a ball in the balls, because that wouldn't be very good. But this gives me that clear shot. And oh my sharpness with the RF version. Beautiful. It worked really well. And with the new version, the Z, the same thing. The differences are the zooming. That's the main difference that you get. This is not external zooming, this is external zooming. This has a better throw, this doesn't have a better throw. That comes in handy when we are shooting sports, like when I go out and photograph basketball, which I did at Temple University, where I sat on the floor and I just used these 2 lenses to compare them as best I could. Now keep in mind, I can't get perfect side-by-sides of the same exact play because I'm just one person trying to use the same camera with the same settings, but use 2 different lenses. It's not that easy. But jumping into this photo of the guy coming up the court, it tracks him extremely well. I didn't miss autofocus because it just locked on and it tracked even when taking 40 frames a second. I was still getting shot after shot after shot. Now sometimes there's the tweener shots where 2 or 3 go out of focus, but that's 2 or 3 out of 40 in a quick second burst. And there's nothing wrong with that. It is able to keep up with it. This one right here is done with the new Z version. Beautifully sharp as we zoom in there. As the player goes up for a basket, it's beautifully sharp as well, and it tracks the subject perfectly fine. Let me jump in here real quick and let you know this video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you're looking to build your very own online portfolio, use what I've been using for over 10 years for my personal website at jaredpolin.com, because it's simple, easy, affordable, and I don't need to know coding, and I can also put up my very own store to sell my images in a matter of minutes. To get your own 14-day free trial, head on over to squarespace.com/FroKnowsPhoto. If you decide that it's for you, use the code FroKnowsPhoto at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Now, let's get back to the video. Now, one more with the Z lens here, just tracking the guy coming down the court, continuously following, continuously focusing. It is so much easier when someone drives the lane for me to go from 200 as they're coming towards me and quickly, while it's still autofocusing and shooting, pull it back all the way to 70 as they get closer. It's much harder to do that with the RF version, and that is the big difference for pros who don't like the fact that you need to twist your wrist so much for that one right there. A couple of more images here with the old one, and by old one, I mean RF. I didn't miss shots with that either. I'm happy with the results that I got. It was just harder as the player is coming towards the basket to track them and pull the zoom from 200 back to 70 and still keep my angles straight. So the biggest question here is, if you already own the RF version, the original that's 6+ years old, do you need to upgrade to the 70-200Z? And the answer to that is, if you are a full-time working professional and you make a living doing this, the answer is 100% yes. Upgrade. If you find that you don't like the twisty turn and the compactness is not the only thing that you care about, but you're missing shots because you're not able to go through the range, then yes, 100% sell this to someone else who's up and coming, and this is still going to be a great lens. If you're not doing full-time professional stuff and it's been great for you for the last 6+ years, then stick with it. there's nothing wrong with it. If you're just starting today, there's a couple of different options to go with. You have to decide, do you want to spend $3,000? This lens is $3,000. That's more than what Sony charges for their 70-200. That's more than what Nikon charges for their 70-200. But you have this one right here, the RF, that goes for $2,500 brand new, which means if you can get it used or refurbished, it's going to be even less, closer to the $2,100 range. Now, speaking of $2,100, just because we have it, you can get the version 3IS for $2,100. Now, if you're going to adapt it onto the RF system, you need to spend $129 more to get the adapter, and you're already spending basically the same amount that you would to get the RF. The RF is better than this lens. It focuses faster. It's going to be nicer on the RF bodies. Does the adapted version work really well? Yes, but if you spent $1,300 for one of these used or $1,400 for one of these used, I would rather see someone just starting out do that than spend $3,000 on this and not be able to get other lenses. So the choice really is yours. Full-time working pros that need the best of the best with Honor Sir, I go with the new one all day. Sell this, put the money into this, and it's not costing you that much more. Someone just starting out today, getting something used or refurbed is a perfectly great choice. But it does come down to two more things. That's the sniff test and the wind tunnel test. Let's start with the wind tunnel test of the new one. Wow. Wow, that passed with flying colors. Absolutely insane. Smell it? Oh, yeah. Oh my God, it's just rotating so smoothly, like baby oil. Beautiful baby oil. So that's it, guys. Let me know down below which one you would go with and why. I know which one I'm going with, but I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much for watching. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.